Hello everyone, my name is Rosalind Sterling. I'm an adult crime comic. Hi everyone, my name is Rosalind Sterling, and today I want to have a little world building discussion, specifically on alternate realities, since my current story takes place in an alternate reality, and I wanted to discuss it a little bit. So an alternate reality, defined by Google, is parallel universe, also known as a parallel dimension, alternate universe, or alternate reality, is a hypothetical self-contained plane of existence coexisting with one's own. The sum of all potential parallel universes that constitute reality is often called a multiverse. So to simplify that definition, an alternate reality is a universe or dimension that is exactly like our own, except for a few small things. Now, sometimes these could be small things, and other times they could be big things, but either way, their alternate realities are supposed to be a version of our own reality that's very close in a lot of ways, but not all ways. Now, I'm sure I've read some books that take place in alternate realities, but I have the brain capacity of a dead goldfish, so I can't think of any off the top of my head right now. But I can, however, give a very common example that a lot of people will give you when they think of alternate realities, and that's Rick and Morty. Pretty much, you have a story where there's interconnected universes that are all really similar to each other, sometimes vastly different, but all kind of similar in some way, shape, or form. And there's different rules in fiction on how alternate realities could go, I guess. I know some stories may interconnect many alternate realities to have, like what Google defined, a multiverse. Other stories may just have two alternate realities. Other stories may have certain rules to their alternate realities. Like maybe in one story, the characters can jump through alternate realities, and then maybe in another story, the characters can't. Once a section of the universe has been broken off into a separate and parallel universe, you cannot reach that universe ever again. So there's many ways that this type of world building could go, and I think it's a really good opportunity to explore for some authors. So if this is something that you want to do, but you're not sure how, I'm not sure if I'm the right person to help you with that, because I'm not here to specifically give advice, but more so discuss the topic. However, I think that this is a really good and in some ways mind-boggling type of universe to pick, because the alternate realities, depending on how you do them, could be really difficult to write or really easy to write, or sometimes both. In my case, I find it kind of both, because the alternate reality that my story takes place in is almost exactly like our universe. Most alternate realities follow along those lines, but I mean, this universe really is a spitting image of the one we have currently. It's almost exactly the same, except for a few differences, and those mostly being things like certain people who died at a certain time actually died before or after when they died in this universe, or things like movies coming out before or after when they originally did in this universe, and so on and so forth. In my universe, there is something very similar to what we call the Mandela effect in this universe, except it wasn't caused by Nelson Mandela. Now, if you don't know what the Mandela effect is, it basically is an effect where people remember things being one way when they never were. And this effect started in 2013 when it was announced that Nelson Mandela died, but everyone strangely remembered him dying in the 80s for some reason. And so many people collectively remembered this that it started an effect, and after that, everyone started to notice things being much different than they actually were. Now, it's kind of hard to say what really caused the Mandela effect, because no one really started to notice these differences in our reality until Nelson Mandela died, but these changes could have been happening even prior to that, and we just didn't really notice it. But the thing that makes this effect strange is that so many people remember these things being different. Now, people remembering things differently isn't a huge deal, especially because sometimes our brains just don't keep up with ourselves. I know how that feels. But when so many people collectively remember a fact being completely different than how it actually is in real life, it gets some people wondering what's going on. And there have actually been theories put out there in real life that the Mandela effect is the cause of some sort of time travel. Someone is going back in time and changing things, and it is disconnecting our current universe into a different one, So even though we're in a separate universe now, our memories from that prior universe stayed with us, and we start having these like moments of like deja vu where we remember things being different. And that's a concept that I really found interesting, and I never really explored it in the first couple drafts of my novel, but after getting some beta feedback, a lot of the feedback was saying that there wasn't really enough mentions of time travel, even though my story is based around a time travel scandal. And so I thought that would be the perfect way to incorporate more time travel without having to include, I guess, actual time travel, since the actual time travel is not quite in the book yet. You don't get to see that till like book 2, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's called something different in my book. It's called the mnemonic effect, which, hold on, I have to Google the definition, but mnemonic, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Mnemonic, defined by Google, is a device such as a pattern of letters, ideas, or associations that assists in remembering something. That's, and then under adjective it says aiding or designed to aid the memory. And this kind of goes along the lines of deja vu, where my characters are experiencing deja vu and they're experiencing this sort of like Mandela effect, but in their universe. But the things that they're experiencing and the changes that they are witnessing are much more extreme than the ones we're witnessing nowadays. Like, oh, okay, some celebrity died on this day when we thought they died on this day, or this movie came out on Tuesday instead of a Wednesday, like we remember, like whatever, you know. I'm still kind of brainstorming what differences are going to be showing up in the book, but pretty much they're just, this world is experiencing higher levels of changes, and they are experiencing them much more frequently. And it is a concept that I think is really interesting and also somewhat funny, because my book is also a comedy, and I think there's a lot of things that I could change around and play with in a humorous way. I'm not sure if your story is a time travel story. I think a lot of stories that take place in alternate universes probably are time travel related, because that's usually what I think of, or what a lot of people think of when they think of alternate universe. It's like, oh, we're time traveling, or some sort of like sci-fi interdimensional hopping, you know, into a different universe, whatever. But maybe it's not. Maybe yours doesn't have anything to do with time travel. But whether it does have anything to do with time travel or not, I think that playing around with the subtle changes would be a good place to start, a good and most obvious place to start. And also, whether or not your characters notice these changes is something that you should probably look out for as well. For example, there's like a universe change, right? Something in your universe is different from how it is in our universe, but do your characters know about it? We know about it as the reader because we currently live in this universe, but maybe your characters don't. Maybe your characters aren't aware that they're in an alternate universe or a parallel universe, whatever, same thing. Maybe your characters are completely unaware. Maybe they discover that they are in an alternate universe. Maybe they discover that there is a whole web, a whole multiverse of different universes. This is just a concept that I think could go a lot of different ways. Now, for world building, aside from what I just mentioned, not all alternate universes will be an alternate universe of our universe, if you get what I'm saying. I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. But maybe your story takes place in an alternate universe of a different universe that doesn't exist. So you have a fictional world, right? And your story takes place in an alternate or a parallel version of that fictional world. Well, I guess the same rules apply to, this universe that you're creating, although now you will have to create 2 new worlds. You are no longer writing a story based on our real reality, which is what makes writing alternate realities a bit easier, simply because we're basing it off of our real world, just tweaking a few things here and there. But if you're basing your alternate reality on a completely fictional world that you created, this means you have to create 2 worlds now. You have to completely create one world from scratch and then create a parallel version of that world. It can be as similar or as different as you want, but that would probably be a lot harder to do. But the same rules would probably apply. Think about what happens in the first world and what's going to be changing in the alternate world. And that's where you can kind of get most of your readers interested. Although, you will have to think about consistency. Now, usually when I see stories that take place in alternate universes, I see one of 2 things happen. I see either this story takes place in an alternate universe based on another universe, and there's only those 2 in existence. Or there's more in existence, but the story just doesn't explore them. Or the universe takes place in a multiverse, and whether the characters explore it or not, it doesn't matter, because usually it's mentioned. So if they explore the multiverse, there's a lot more world building to go into it, but if they don't, you can at least just mention it. But either way, there's either just the 2 worlds, or there's a multiverse of parallel universes, and it's your choice on whether or not you actually want to explore those universes. But the more you explore, obviously the more detail there's going to have to go into developing these worlds. Even if they're very similar to each other, you have to be consistent, because the whole point of an alternate universe is that it's not the same as the universe it started from, because alternate universes are, in a sense, just a broken off version of a current universe. So you have, for example, I'm going to use my digital art pens for this. You have Universe A and Universe B. Universe B didn't exist until a certain decision was made that broke off that universe into a different universe, which can get really complicated if you think about it, because now we're getting into the idea that every decision that everyone makes creates a new universe, which, if that was the case, that would mean that there are quite literally just trillions and trillions of universes. But again, that's up to you how far you want to go on that. But you have to be consistent. No world is the same. And if you're going to be having multiple universes showing up and being explored in your story, you have to actually think about what's going to be changed and how each world is slightly different or completely different in its own way. You can't have one world be the same as the other. But in order to get this kind of point across, I feel like in some sense would have to mention why that world's different. Again, I'm not here to force advice down people's throats, just kind of giving my own suggestions on how I see this topic being handled. But if you do explore multiple universes, get creative. Show the readers how each universe is different. It can be something as small as like that one thing mentioned in Rick and Morty. It was the recent episode where all the characters migrated to a different universe that was exactly like their original universe, or universes, because they came from different universes. The episode went through a lot of shit, but the universe was exactly the same except for one tiny thing, and it was that they pronounced the word Parmesan as Parmesan. I don't know, but but it can be something as small as that, or something as major as the sky being purple instead of blue. I don't know. You get creative. I think a good way to actually come up with ideas for this, because having to, create multiple alternate dimensions is a lot of work. And so usually what I do is I look up a list of like major events, or just a lot of big things that happened in the year that my story takes place in, and then just think of slight alterations. Or if you're doing like an alternate reality based on a completely fictional universe that has nothing to do with ours, you can maybe use a world building generator and just flip a coin and say, hey, this thing goes here, this thing goes here, and blah blah blah. But the key to an alternate dimension is just having somewhat of a consistency, so you're not like throwing your readers around everywhere. So I also just wanted to talk a little bit of my own world in my own story. I know I talked a little bit about my alternate universe and how things are kind of different, how things kind of work around there, but I want to give kind of like a full description of my own world, and just introduce people to the world of my story that I will be publishing in a few months, hopefully. And also just give an example of what I've done. Maybe you'll take inspiration off of it. So the world that I've created is called Cliff Bay, and it is a city in California that originally was part of Los Angeles. So where Cliff Bay is located is at a certain section of Los Angeles. I'll have to research more maps of Los Angeles to figure out what section I want it to take over. But I know it's definitely taking a part of Los Angeles that is near the Pacific Ocean. Okay, yeah. So I know that that Cliff Bay takes up a part of Los Angeles that is bordering the Pacific Ocean. But basically in my world, I would say in like the 1920s, I'm still deciding on a concrete year, especially because this information won't even be brought up in the book until like book 2 or 3. But around the 1920s, a certain section of Los Angeles broke off into its own city called Cliff Bay, and the reason it was named that was because aside from there being some mountains and whatnot in California, there was a specific mountain with a very, very large and prominent cliff that oversaw the Pacific Ocean, where like the beach was and everything. And because that was the most like eye-catching spot of the city, they decided to name it Cliff Bay, because the cliff looked over the bay. And so now, fast forward, that the story is now taking place currently in 2005 in the first book, and this alternate dimension is, like I said earlier, pretty much exactly like our universe, except it is much more advanced. Technology that they have is obviously much more advanced and very hidden, just like how our current government, I guess, kind of hides stuff from us. This government does the same, except what they're capable of is truly incomprehensible by the public eye. I mean, it's a time travel scandal. And so the fact that time travel even exists in the world where people are still using flip phones and VCRs and those really bulky box televisions, it's really shocking, and no one could really comprehend it if that news came out to the public. So now we have this world with very crazy gadgets that no one's really aware of. In fact, it's not just the government that knows about it, it's anyone who has the capability to invent technology. Because anyone who's smart enough to invent this type of crazy technology is either smart enough to keep it to themselves, or someone somewhere ends up finding out what they're doing and kills them. Now, some differences with this universe, as mentioned before, are mostly just things with like celebrities and some politics, some not popular, but some very well-known deaths, some things with movies just being like changed and whatnot. Now these effects are happening very quickly in a very short period of time, so within a couple years things are happening like back to back. Like, I mean, it gets to a point that it starts off with like a few things happening every couple months to a few things happening every day or every week, which obviously gets people's attention much more than it does in our universe, because the Mandela effect in our universe doesn't really affect such large subject matter or very obvious subject matter, at least that quickly. And so in this universe, everyone's talking about it, but the news and the government doesn't want anyone talking about it because they kind of know what it is, but everyone else doesn't. Now, fast forward into book 3 is when Cliff Bay will actually change its name, and I have not revealed this information anywhere, I don't think. But and this is something that won't really get mentioned until book 3, so I'm going to try to keep the information light because I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who is actually interested in reading my books. And I'm not going to say why this name changes, but all I'm going to say is that a certain someone or some people in my book make this technology more worldwide and accessible to people. So it's no longer a secret, and the public is obviously terrified, but also really happy that now they have a lot more to work with, And so they're just very thankful to have all this great shit to work with to make life easier and more interesting. And so to celebrate, they call the city Techport. And because Cliff Bay, or now Techport, was the first city basically anywhere to publicly show what they're capable of making, it got that name. And after that, basically technology and everything started booming everywhere. I mean, more things were being revealed, more people were coming out with these crazy inventions, and now people are gaining access to technology that was once only available to agencies, scientists, or pretty much anyone that just had the intelligence to create such things. It's kind of a good thing, but also doesn't really end well, which is how a lot of stuff happens in my book that I won't spoil. But yeah, that's kind of the basis of my world. I think it's pretty basic. I'm not going to sit here and talk about my world like it's super unique and it's the most jaw-dropping, crazy, unique world that you have ever read about. It's probably not. I'm sure there's something out there that is very similar to my own world, but that's the world that my book takes place in, and I'm really happy with it. It's somewhat simple, but I've had a lot of fun developing it over the years, and I've gotten very attached to it. I encourage everyone to get creative, search different locations and time eras, and think what, place and time you want to, I guess, kind of parody, because alternate universes are kind of like a parody of our own universe. It may not always be funny, but it is just, I guess, a parody in a sense. Hey, it's editing me. And there's something else I want to mention, and that's there's a lot of opportunity for character exploration as well, because I know in my book, my main characters had completely different lives in the original universe, and although it doesn't get explored immediately, throughout the trilogy, you do start to understand more and more about the past life that they once had versus the life they have now. Whether the life they have now is better or worse, that's up for debate, but it's up to you as the author to make that decision. Do you want your characters to have a really good life compared to the one they had in this alternate dimension, or do you want your characters to have a meh life? Why am I zooming in? Hold on. But do you want your characters to have a really good life compared to the one they had in the old dimension, or do you want them to have a really bad life compared to the one they had in the old dimension? A meh life maybe? I don't know. There's just a lot of ways that this could go. Very simple decisions could make drastic changes in someone's life, and you won't really notice it until you see how many different universes ended up drastically different because of one simple decision. So it's really up to you how far you want to go with that and what kind of changes you'd like to explore with your characters and their lives and how things are different. Hell, maybe even some of your characters are just completely different in personality, like they're just completely different people because they had a different upbringing or some life event that changed them that didn't happen in one universe but happened in another. It's just there's just so much you could do with alternate realities, and I could talk about it for so long. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Yeah, I think alternate universes are really fun to play around with, and I could talk about for hours. Honestly, a lot of the things that I have talked about on this channel and will talk about on this channel are just really large topics that I could just talk about for days. So I don't know, maybe I'll do more videos on alternate realities and go more in depth into really what they are and how you could maybe write them. But for now, that's all I really have to say, and I hope everyone has a great day. I wish everyone good luck with their writing, and if you're writing an alternate universe or parallel universe, whatever you want to call it, best of luck with that. Do your research, get creative, and have fun with it.